Hey everyone, Bigfoot here. We talk a lot about hiking your own hike. Well, today I want to tell you about my own hike. Today I'm going to tell you how I hiked the Appalachian Trail in 100 days. To start off, I will be referring to parts of the video today on certain topics that I've already done videos before on. To save time, I won't be elaborating on these specific topics very much. I do encourage you to seek out these links to the videos and watch them. They are all in the details below. Well, to start at the very beginning, when I decided that I wanted to thru-hike the Appalachian Trail, I knew that I would be challenged to do so in a very limited time frame if I wanted to keep my job. So that rose three big questions. Question number one, how could I cut time on the trail by being more efficient? With my history of employment with McDonald's in the fast service industry, I had to learn how to take a holistic approach to maximize my potential. One of these components was efficiency. At work, how could we optimize and eliminate unnecessary bends, twists, turns, and reduce steps without a sacrifice to the quality and the cleanliness of a restaurant? I would use this tactical approach I adopted in business to that on the trail. Taking the same idea, I would use this on the trail. How could I eliminate any unnecessary tasks that would reduce the amount of bends, twists, turns, and steps that I had on the trail? I knew I had to figure this out to be able to offset my average at best physical ability, below average physical condition that I had at the time, to be able to hike the 2,200 mile Appalachian Trail in 100 days. Now, to add to all of this, my second question, how could I be efficient by doing the mileage and finish the trail in 100 days without getting injured? And lastly, my third question, what would I have to mentally endure to persevere through the difficulties that I knew I was going to encounter of a 100-day, 2,200 mile through hike through the Appalachian Mountains? Now, before I could understand the answers to any of these questions, I had to start somewhere, and that was to begin planning and have an understanding of exactly what I was getting into. So I started planning. I started planning about 18 months before the start of my thru-hike. Things I planned was, what kind of mileage did I have to average? How could I cut the most weight off my pack without having any sacrifices or little sacrifices to the comfort that I like to have on the trail? And most importantly, the safety. What was the best time to start my thru-hike that would give me the best chance to be able to finish the trail in 100 days with the temperature I would see, the weather, the bugs? And lastly, what did I have to learn right now that I wouldn't really be able to have the luxury of time to learn on the trail? One of these things was mental toughness. What was the mental toughness that I needed to handle doing the mileage in the very short window of time that I had? And then any knowledge of the trail, terrain, resupply points, how much money did I really need to spend and budget? After doing some planning, then I switched and changed gears to preparing. Now, the first thing that I did when I was preparing is dialing in my gear. I started with a base weight of about 21 pounds. I spent about 12 months testing and perfecting my gear. I dropped the things that I really didn't use a lot on the trail, and I did this by going on many pre-hikes. And I really decided and learned to be able to live on the trail without a lot of the essentials that before I thought were important. Now, I truly believe that when you are looking at cutting base weight, you do have to make some sacrifices. I knew that I needed to have a low enough base weight that would give me the best chance of being able to hike the mileage that I would be able to do. Now, I also knew that cutting weight didn't mean cutting risks to safety. I knew that the balance would be very delicate between the safety and the comfortability of my pack. All in all, I was able to achieve this, and I started with a base weight that was just below 13 pounds. The next thing that I did to prepare was research. Like many of us, I went to YouTube. I watched hundreds, probably 1,000 videos about everything that I could find topics on about the Appalachian Trail. I knew that I'd have to learn things through other people's experiences, and I was okay with that. And then came the physical part. I needed to understand what I would have to go through physically on the trail. Now, the only way to do that is to go out on the trail and bring your pack with everything in it. So that's what I did. I went out to the Ozark Trail and I picked the toughest section of the Ozark Trail to train. Now, I had a fully loaded pack, which also included all my food, all my water, everything I possibly need. And I went a little overboard because I thought it was better to be heavier than lighter. I spent the final 10 weeks before my thru-hike doing these pre-hikes. I started with a very modest mileage of around 10 miles and slowly increased all the way up to 30-mile days. Now, with that, I was able to see what it would physically take and what it would physically feel like hiking that many miles. And in return to that, I was able to know what it would mentally take to handle the physical part. I think it's really important, and I knew it would be important, to understand physically what I go through, but I feel you can't really understand what to go through and what you'll experience mentally until you feel the physical part. With this, I was able to understand the mental emotions, or at least a little bit of the mental emotions that I would have to deal with on the Appalachian Trail. Well, this now leads me to my first question. How do I cut time and be more efficient? During my pre-hikes, I learned areas that I would have to figure out in order to save seconds. Now, this was important because A, I needed to hike more miles, and I knew my mileage would continue to increase on the trail. And B, I knew it was important because I wanted to make sure that I had time to be able to spend on the trail and enjoy myself and the experience. Now, here were the techniques that I learned and would have to perfect on the trail that drove my efficiency. My first technique was how could I set up and break down camp faster. The first thing was learning how to pitch my tent. This is the first video that I'm referring to. It's how I pitch my Z-Packs duplex tent. Starting off, it was difficult to pitch the perfect tent, and it took quite a while for me to kind of figure this out. Refer to my video and I show you how my technique helped me save time and be more efficient. Secondly, how could I be more efficient with packing my backpack? I knew that there was more effective ways to do this, and I wanted to be able to save time without losing stuff. I found out really quickly on the trail that it was really important to be able to have places for everything. It was very easy to lose things, especially the smaller things, if I didn't have a place that I would put it back every single time. Now, I did a video on how I packed my backpack. Check that video out in the details below. The second technique I learned was how could I save time eating? And really, the decision was, do I go with a stove and cook, or do I go stoveless? I was really nervous about going stoveless. I've never been hiking before this and not cooked. So this was kind of scary. I've heard about people going stoveless, but at first wasn't open to the idea. Now, when I went on my pre-hikes, I learned pretty quickly the more mileage that I hiked, the less likely I really felt like cooking at the end of the day. Most of the time, all I wanted to do was get into camp, set up my tent, and eat as fast as I could. After hiking the 20 to 30 mile range during my pre-hikes, I made the decision to go stoveless. I went stoveless to save time in camp and really to start eating right away. The last thing I really felt like was cooking at the end of the night. My decision to go stoveless really didn't have a lot to do with weight. Now, some of the benefits that I had with going stoveless was I didn't have to worry about finding fuel in town. I met a lot of hikers that during certain parts of the town, they had to travel to certain areas or certain outfitters to be able to find fuel. And that was just a nice thing to not have to worry about. Now, I did do a video on resupplying and really the choices of food that I ate on the trail. The next thing that I learned quickly on my pre-hikes was how could I avoid unnecessary tasks that would slow me down and slow my rhythm down during my hike. The first thing was taking off my pack. Every time I needed to take off my pack, it really slowed me down. Anytime I slowed down, it stopped my rhythm. When I didn't have rhythm, it was really hard to get back into a groove. After the first 470 miles, when I hiked into Damascus, I decided to buy the Z-Pack's 4-in-1 multi-pack. Now, this was one of the greatest things that helped me on the trail because I was able to pack everything that I would need during the course of the day, except for filtering water, that I really needed to take my pack off for. What I would do is I would pack up my front multi-pack with all of the food and gear items that I would need, like my body glide, my headlamp, my phone, and things like that. I also did a video on my Z-Pack's multi-pack. Check that out as well. The next task that I had to figure out was how could I eat and eat often? And how could I do this without having to stop all the time? Well, I was able to figure out ways to save time by eating. I stuck to foods during the day that were really simple that I could carry not only in my front pack, but I could eat while I walked. For me, what worked out the best was eating every hour. If I went more than 2 hours without eating, I would feel my loss of energy immediately, and it would really be hard to get back into a rhythm and groove. Most of the time I'd have to stop and eat a few things, get a few hundred calories in my system, and it took about 10 minutes till I started feeling it again. The third task that I wanted to perfect is keeping hydrated. I knew that it was going to be difficult if every time that I wanted to take a drink that I would have to grab a water bottle out of my side pouch. During my pre-hikes, it was very difficult to have to turn and twist and grab those water bottles out of my pouch every time I wanted to take a sip. I knew this was important because I would have to hydrate all the time, and I just needed something more convenient than that. My answer was getting a shoulder pouch for my Z-Pack Arc Blast. It worked out great. I was able to grab my water bottle out. I carried a 17-ounce water bottle, and it was easy to be able to drink, which made it easier for me to hydrate and stay hydrated. Now, I did carry another water bottle, which was a liter smart water bottle, and I kept that holstered on my side pouch, but it wasn't frequent that I actually had to pull it out. The only time I would pull out my liter water bottle was to refill my 17-ounce bottle that was in my shoulder pouch. I did do a video of my Z-Pack's Arc Blast and cover a couple of these things in that video. The next task was how could I filter water more effectively and efficiently? Now, what I ended up doing was deciding to actually carry a little bit more water than what most hikers were willing to carry. I had a total capacity of carrying 1.5 liters or just above 1.5 liters. And if I wanted to, I could fill up my Sawyer bags and carry a little bit more if I ever did need to. However, every time I did filter water, I would always fill up both my water bottles all the way to the top. And I was okay with carrying a little bit more water and having to stop less frequently instead of carrying a lot less water and stopping more frequently. Again, it was all about my rhythm. The next technique was resting. I conditioned my body to take fewer rest breaks and shorter rest breaks when I did take them. We developed a rule on the trail, no stoppie till the toppie, and this helped us really continue to ascend with rhythm. And a lot of times I didn't even need to stop once I had my trail legs. But again, it was about conditioning my body for that. A lot of times when I got to the very top, I didn't even feel like resting because I would be able to rest either on the flat part on the top, or if there wasn't flat, which most of the mountains were not flat, I would rest as I descended. If it was a modest descent, this was a perfect time to eat an energy bar and start to recoup some of that energy as well. Well, that covers 3 of the major 4 areas that I targeted to save efficiency. Again, recapping those 3 things were setting up and taking down camp, eating while I was in camp, and then lastly, how could I be more efficient while I was actually hiking? Well, the last major area I targeted was vlogging on the trail. I would need to learn the basics of vlogging, which, to be honest, I knew nothing about. But I needed to do this so I wouldn't have to waste a lot of time filming, editing, and uploading my videos more than what I knew I'd already have to do. This proved to be one of the most frustrating things that I experienced on the trail. I had to understand how to upload videos without being stuck in town or having to take additional zeros to upload them. There were some videos that would take anywhere between 4 to 8 hours to upload. The broadband speed on the trail was really bad, and this was a very steep learning curve for me that ended up taking me about 1,000 trail miles to really figure out. Now, to help share my experiences, I did do a video on tips on editing and uploading videos on the trail. Now, I always look at my next 2 resupply points. I would do this so I could understand the mileage I needed to do so I could properly plan and spend free time in town, as well as know the amount of food to miles that I would have to have and manage. Now, I would normally have a backup plan just in case if something happened and my mileage got off. Now, most nights after dark, I would spend time in my tent editing my videos, and I would also start looking up at the next day's terrain, trying to figure out exactly what my daily mileage looked like. I always knew what mileage I needed to do to get to my next resupply point, and would kind of just break that up and manage that from day to day. That wraps up ways and techniques that I was able to be more efficient and save time on the trail. Which brings me to my second question. How in the heck was I going to be able to hike big miles while maximizing the reduction of risk to injury and sickness? The first thing that I found out was stretching. Stretching ended up being a very crucial piece of my hike. I would stretch before and after every single hike. I will tell you that this took incredible discipline. Now, I did a video that showed these stretches amongst some other things. It was called Preventing Injury on Your Thru-Hike. The next safety tip was maximizing the use of my trekking poles. I needed to be able to shift the weight impact that was being placed on my lower body to my trekking poles. Now, on the trail, I was able to develop a technique that worked great for me that helped keep my lower body fresh and pain-free. During the course of my entire thru-hike, I took a total of only 8 ibuprofens. Now, I did a video on this. It's called Proper Use of Trekking Poles. Check it out. Which now shifts me to the importance of pack weight. I knew I would have to perfect my pack weight to maximize the functionality of my gear items while having the flexibility to be able to be comfortable and safe. Now, I've done lots of videos on this. You can check out my final video, which is titled My Final AT Ultralight Gear List, which shows all the gear that I started with. And then I also did a video of my post-thru-hike ultralight gear review that talks about what I actually ended with. My base weight that I ended my hike with was 10.5 pounds. What you experience in the beginning, and most hikers experience in the beginning, is blisters. I leveraged Katie tape and placed Katie tape over any hot spots before I started to develop blisters. Now, I did get a couple blisters on the trail, but they were minimal compared to what a lot of other thru-hikers had. I did a specific video just on this. It's called Preventing Blisters on Your Thru-Hike. Now, when it came to filtering water, I was extremely careful on filtering water. A lot of thru-hikers stopped filtering water, and I just couldn't take that risk. I couldn't take the risk of contracting Giardia and possibly being off the trail for a week. So I continued to filter my water. The only times that I wouldn't filter my water was when I was on top of a mountain and there was a spring there that I knew exactly where the water was coming from, which was from the ground. There was probably only a handful of times that I actually did do this. And then what was really important was ticks. You hear about ticks on the Appalachian Trail, and you hear about tons of stories of people that have contracted Lyme disease, hikers that have contracted Lyme disease on the Appalachian Trail. I made sure that I applied permethrin to all of my gear every single month. Now, I did a video talking about ticks. It's titled, How to Deal with Ticks on the Appalachian Trail. And lastly, how could I avoid taking any extra zeros but still spend the time, especially in town, required to resting and recovering from my hike? So what I would do is I would get up early the day I would hike into town, and I would hike hard and try to get at least 20 miles. So typically the days I got into town and how I planned out my mileage, I would be somewhere between 20 to 22 miles from town. Didn't always work like that, but I tried to make it work and get somewhere in that low 20s to town. My goal to get in town was to be there before 3 p.m. Once I got in town, I would do all my chores. First off, I would make sure I plugged in my backup battery. If I didn't have enough time to charge that, then I wouldn't be able to have enough battery in that backup bank to really last my next resupply, in between my next resupply points. Then I would shower and do my laundry and eat and resupply. But I would take the rest of the time to rest and relax. The following day, I would always check out of the hostel, the hotel, motel, the latest they would possibly let me stay. Typically, that was somewhere between noon and 1 p.m. My average starting time coming out of town was much later than most hikers. I probably got back on the trail about 1 p.m. on average, and I would hike all the way until dusk, at least trying to get 8, maybe sometimes even 9 hours of hiking in to get at least somewhere between 20 to 24 miles in. Now what this enabled me to do was be able to hike a total of 40 to 45 miles the day I went into town and the day I went out, with the ability of staying in town for almost 24 hours to be able to rest and relax and kind of recoup my body. And this brings me to my last question. How would I manage my emotions of the hike while keeping a positive attitude? Now, I learned on the trail that it was uber important to find ways to boost my morale. If my morale was high, it was much easier for me to keep a positive attitude and outlook on my hike. If I had a positive attitude and high morale, my mental emotions were much easier to manage. The most difficult emotion that I had to balance was the pressure that I had on me to finish my through hike in the 100 days. This was especially dire when I hit the halfway point at day 54 and knew that I only have 46 days to do the rest of the through hike, knowing that the most difficult section was the last 400 miles of the trail. Now with this, I learned tips that would help trick my mind and keep me in a great place when I needed to go there. Now, I did a couple of videos on these topics. The first video was tips. It's actually 7 different tips that I personally used on my through hike to handle my emotions, especially with the pressure that I had on me. The other video that I did was the common emotions that you feel as an AT through hiker. Now this one is more directed towards everything that most hikers experience during their journey from being on top of Spring Mountain until they get to Katahdin. Now while applying the skills in both my personal and professional life, I was able to successfully through hike the Appalachian Trail within my deadline. My final time was 99 days and 22 hours. I needed to use every single skill to plan, prepare, adopt techniques that helped increase efficiency, be disciplined enough on the trail to reduce the injury risk, and being strong-minded to be able to manage my emotions. I don't have any regrets of how I hiked my hike of the Appalachian Trail. I found out more about myself and the limits that I have on the 3 months that I was on the trail than the first 30 years of my life. I was blessed to have the opportunity of the gift of time and the health to be able to have this incredible opportunity to thru-hike the Appalachian Trail. One thing is for sure, I am a hiker. The AT has just opened doors of possibility for me and what I can accomplish when I am determined and driven. If you have drive, a great attitude, and are open to adapting to the changing conditions that you will encounter on the trail, you can hike the Appalachian Trail. There is an 82-year-old hiker right now attempting a thru-hike of the Appalachian Trail this year in 2017. Don't allow anyone to brainwash you into thinking that you cannot hike the Appalachian Trail. I want to thank everyone that supported me and commented on my videos during my thru-hike. You can't imagine how powerfully inspiring this was. That gave me a higher drive to finish my journey. As I've said before, I am forever grateful. Well, that wraps it up for me, guys. If you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for the next Bigfoot sighting.